This Week in Virology, the podcast about viruses, the kind that make you sick. This Week in Virology, Episode 7.
Wow, we're up to 7 already, Vince?
We are, November 6th, 2008. I'm Vincent Racaniello.
I'm Dick Despommier.
And today we have a guest in the studio being your office, Dick. And his name is Aidan Racaniello. Welcome, Aidan.
Sounds like a relative.
Yeah, I'm Vincent Racaniello's son, and I'm really happy to be here today.
Aidan is an 8th grader, and he's very interested in viruses, and he's going to talk with us about viruses that occur in some video games, because that's what you do for a living. You play video games, right?
That's right.
He does that for a living. Well, somebody has to do something.
So we thought this would be good because it turns out there are a number of video games, which you probably don't play, Dick.
I do not. I'm sorry to say that.
Which I don't play, but I do watch Aidan play extensively. And they have infectious disease components to them.
Really?
And Aidan actually suggested we do this. He's been listening to our podcast. He said, why don't we do a podcast on viruses in video games? So let's do that. Okay. So we have 3 video games we're going to talk about. And the first one is World of Warcraft. What is that, Aidan?
World of Warcraft is an online MMORPG, which stands for Massive Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game. In this game, you can basically interact with other players all around the world.
Okay, so where does the virus in WoW come from? You following this, Dick?
I am following this.
You look a little...
Well, I want to know what the object is.
The object.
Oh, all right. So
why would you want to play it?
This game is very massive and very complicated, all right? So...
Right away, I'm not interested. Sounds like my life.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of different components in this game. So you can choose one of the 2 factions in the game, either the Horde or the Alliance. You start the game, and then you can level up 80 levels with this coming expansion. Once you have reached level 60, you could participate in raids with at least 40 other people. That's a lot of people. So there's one of these raids where, of course, you have 40 people, and one of the bosses that you fight, which requires teamwork and communication, has an ability called Cursed Blood. Now, this ability does damage over time and can spread from player to player. So, this one player, hunters, they can have pets. So his pet was infected with this curse. He dismissed his pet, so it was no longer in the world, like it was away, but it still had the disease. So then he opened it up in a city with the disease, and it started spreading to other people. Now, the lower level people, like with not that much health, they would die off quickly, and they really didn't have a chance. So, but higher level people who are stronger, they had more health, and they could last longer, but eventually they would die. But some people called NPCs, non-playing characters, they were completely immune to this infection, and they did not die. So, this infection simulates real life, epidemics.
Sure.
Very accurately. And it didn't even mean to.
So was it ever said online that this was a virus, or they just called it an infection?
The ability was a curse, so some players could dispel it, and so that would basically represent the doctors and their vaccines, but it would be hard to completely exterminate this whole breakout.
Yeah, just like in real life.
Yeah, exactly.
So, in fact, this whole incident, which happened in 2005, right? It was the subject of a journal article in Lancet Infectious Diseases, which we'll put a link to in the show notes. It was called, by a couple of epidemiologists at Yale, The Untapped Potential of Virtual Game Worlds to Shed Light on Real-World Epidemics. So as Aidan said, by battling this, what would you call this guy? Hakar.
Hakar.
What was he? A bad guy. By battling him, you would get he would throw blood on you, right? And you would get this infection. And as Aidan said, it spread through pets and other players.
So it's a zoonosis.
And it was
Exactly.
perhaps it was a zoonosis, yeah. And it says here that within a few hours, so the game makers installed a patch which introduced this new character.
Correct.
And they
And
said
the whole dungeon.
within a few hours after the patch was installed, the infection had spread to millions of players. Now, how many players play WoW worldwide, do you know?
Well, but back then, it wasn't too much.
10 million.
About like 10 million
Wait,
back then?
that's not a lot? 10 million is
Well,
not a
now
lot.
it's 10 million, but back then it was probably around 6 million.
Come on, that's a lot.
It spread to millions and millions of
Wow.
players.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so eventually the game makers had to stop the game and pull this guy out from the software, and they rebooted their computers essentially to get rid of the infection because they had no idea it was going to spread in this manner.
How
right?
interesting.
Well, it actually didn't pull out the boss. They just took away that ability. So they
okay.
didn't, yeah. But it was a big
So I wrote actually...
So it's like being a vaccination.
Yeah.
in a way. I wrote a little article on this in the next edition of our textbook. And it's called Video Games Model Infectious Disease Epidemics.
Wow.
And many aspects of the game model and real-world epidemics. And in fact, there are models that are made to construct epidemics. The Centers for Disease Control has spent millions of dollars, but they don't do as good a job as WoW did. And the reason is because there were real people involved in this, and their actions contributed to the spread of the infection.
Well said.
Right? So putting their pets away, for example, contributed to the pet, because putting your pet away is not a real world thing, but then when they appeared in another city with the animals, they spread the infection.
Absolutely.
So let me read to you what I wrote here, because it's the best way to say it. While enjoyment and entertainment are the central focus of such games, the players are serious and devoted, and their responses to situation of danger approximate real-world reactions. For example, during the corrupted blood epidemic, players with healing ability were the first to attempt to help the infected players. This action probably affected the dynamics of the epidemic, since infected players survived longer and were able to travel and spread the infections. So I conclude that multiplayer video games provide an excellent opportunity to examine the consequences of human actions within a statistically significant and controlled computer simulation. So in fact, these authors of the paper in Lancet concluded that this is an excellent model to study disease transmission,
Wow.
better than the ones that have
Wow.
been made just for this purpose.
I'll be darned.
So I think that's a fascinating example of...
So how do you make money at this game, then? How do the manufacturers of these games make their money?
Well, to play the game, it costs $15 a month.
And how many people play this game?
About 10 million.
Let's see, 10 million
Do the math.
times 15.
We'll get back to you later.
That's right, get my calculator. Get my abacus.
But of course, if you made a game just on infectious diseases, it probably wouldn't sell as well. This is an interesting game because many aspects of battle and
Right.
sort of war are represented, right? It's not just the infection that you like in this game, obviously.
Yeah.
So now there's no
Much
more
more
infection
things.
in WoW, right?
Well, not true. There's no more infection that could break out again in WoW. In some dungeons, for example, there's certain probably disease. The name has to do with like some itching, like rash or something like that, but it's not spreadable. But it doesn't really have have like a symptom or anything.
Okay.
So, but it's not spreadable. Like Blizzard has, the game manufacturer has done a really good job trying to make other abilities not spread.
So let's review just a couple, before we move on to the next video game, let's review a couple of things. So the first infection happened when this guy threw blood at people, right? So that is some infections actually happen, but most
Ebola will happen.
Ebola, but it's quite rare.
True.
But your normal infection isn't spread by having blood thrown at you, so that's a little bit of a fantasy.
True.
But in some situations, something comes to mind is a case of a young technician at a government animal facility years ago who had a monkey spit in her eye, and she contracted a herpes infection that was lethal. So spitting. So you can imagine that blood. But then when the pets got the infection, how did they spread it to humans in other cities? Do you know?
That's a very good question.
Did they bite them?
Well, it's possible so that they could have dueled another player
And the blood would
spread.
infect.
But after a duel is over, most of the debuffs or damage over time spells on players go away after the duel is over. So maybe the Hakar, the boss, didn't actually attack someone by throwing it at them. Maybe it was like an aura, like it automatically jumped from player to player.
So this is a good transmission model, but the
like airborne transmission.
The details, I guess.
Maybe their dogs had fleas.
Maybe they peed on them. It's urine transmitted.
He said jumped. I just thought of a flea when I heard that.
There may be a respiratory component. So the precise mechanisms of transmission in this case aren't so well developed.
Right.
But we'll see in our next example that they are far more developed. Anything? Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
No, I'm just going to interrupt just for one moment to let you know that when my son was your age, I have two sons, and when they were both your age, they both got wrapped up in Dungeons and Dragons. But Dungeons and Dragons in those days was a board game. There were no video games that were as sophisticated as the ones are today. So, but they had all these characteristics of, like righteous good and evil and all these other characteristics that you would put onto these characters. And then you'd play the game out according to the rules. And it was a fascinating game because it never had an end. And this sounds like the same deal, except you have to pay a lot of money for these things.
Yeah, exactly. This game just keeps going. There's no real goal or end to this game.
It's just fun to play, is that it?
Like I said, there's going to be 2 expansions out in a matter of next week, right? Next week the second expansion's coming out, and it's going to raise the level cap to 80, and it used to be just 60. So the game keeps going on and on.
$15 a shot. That's what I'd do. I don't know about you, Vince, but I think we're in the wrong business.
Yes, I think so too. But we didn't think of this. So.
No, we did not.
Yep. So there's more and more things to do. They keep adding new content to the game. Leveling up is lots of fun, but it gets boring after a while. From leveling from 1 to 80, that's a lot to level. So.
Anything else we should say before we move on?
One more thing, not according to diseases. Along with this expansion, there's going to be a new class called the Hero class, and this is going to allow players to start at level 55, let alone till level 1. So that's going to cut back a lot of leveling. So maybe that'll attract more players to play, or it's going to be less to level. So,
could you introduce a infection yourself in this game in some way?
No.
Yeah, it's too bad. It would be interesting, wouldn't it, if you could do that?
That's another game called The Mad Scientist.
Yes. Well, Dick, maybe we need to have some ideas about that. I don't need 10 million players, but 1 million at $15 a month would be okay.
That would support our habit in the lab, that's for sure.
All right, what's our second game now?
All right, our second game is called Pandemic 2. This game does not need to be bought, purchased, or acquired in any way. Just go on the internet and find it.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes. This is by a company called Newgrounds, right?
What was the other company, by the way?
The other company for World of Warcraft was called Blizzard Entertainment. They're a really big company, have lots of games out, coming out with a few new ones too. All right, so this game can be found on lots of different websites, but like Vincent said, we're going to put this in a link.
Right, in the show notes.
What this game is basically about, you can... the goal is to infect and destroy the human race.
Excellent.
Right. Now you're talking.
So the first time you go to the game, what's the first screen that you get?
All right, the first screen you get is the main menu.
Which
I'm
says...
just kidding. All right, so... Okay. So they have...
You want little humans, big humans, females, males. That's a...
Nah, all right, so you can choose to watch the tutorial, which I did and I recommended a lot. But when you start the game, you can it goes to a screen where you can select a disease class. And the 3 diseases are viruses, bacteria, or and parasites.
And they say something about each one.
Yeah, exactly. So...
Can you read that?
I can read.
Will you read it, though?
Yeah, good question. All right, so the viruses have the fastest evolution. The bacteria have the medium evolution. Parasite has the slowest evolution.
Would you agree with those characteristics?
Well, it's all based on reproductive rates. The quicker you divide, the more mutants you'll create this way by random process. So I would agree with that entirely.
Okay.
That teaches a good lesson, actually.
I think that's great. Right off the bat, you learn something.
You do.
Right?
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
All right.
Go ahead.
So viruses are most affected by the environment, and they have a bonus to infectivity, which basically means they can infect people faster. But since they are most affected by the environment, they're probably going to have a hard time infecting people quickly. So bacteria, they are normally affected by the environment, which means that you don't have to make them resistant to the environment as much as viruses, but it would still help to infect. And what I like about bacteria is that they also have a bonus to drug resistance, which means if you upgrade the drug resistance.
Sounds like your course, Vince.
That's right. It's a great game to play in the course. Actually,
Wow.
You'll see.
All right, so skipping ahead, in game you can upgrade resistances to heat, cold, and drug. So since bacteria has a bonus to drug resistance, when you upgrade all 4 tiers of the resistance, it takes a while for the Human United Health thing to make the vaccine.
World Health Organization.
Yeah.
Yes.
So after a while, when your virus or bacteria or parasite infects lots of countries, the World Health, what is it, Vincent?
World Health Organization.
World Health Organization will start creating a vaccine. And the more drug resistance you have, the more days it will take. But if they do manage to finish the vaccine, it'll also take a number more days to deploy the vaccine in hospitals that are still open.
So that's what you're racing against, right? You're trying to kill everyone, and the human beings are trying to make vaccines or drugs to save themselves. So you win by killing everyone, and you lose when a vaccine or a drug is made.
Well, yes, exactly. You lose when a vaccine or drug is made.
Okay.
You'll also lose. Well, I don't think it's technically losing, but you don't finish the game if a region closes off airports, shipyards. Oh, but we'll get into that later.
Okay. What's the next screen you would see? You choose your
wait,
disease.
I'm not done yet.
Okay.
So the third class
parasites
is a parasite.
And we have,
Forgot that.
Dick is a parasitologist.
All right.
He studies them.
So, Dick, would you agree about these characteristics?
Let's see.
Parasites, we already said they have the slowest evolution.
They do.
They're least affected by the environment.
Some are and some ain't.
And they have the lowest visibility.
Why is that?
I'm not sure, but in the game, you get symptoms that raise or lower visibility.
Oh, I see what you mean.
So this would make the symptoms less visible.
Well, that's actually pretty accurate because one of the lessons, I'm right in the middle of teaching this to our medical students right now in parasitic diseases. And one of the big lessons I'm trying to teach the medical students is that for viruses and bacterial infections and even fungal infections, there are often symptoms that you can associate with those diseases. Mm-hmm. But with parasitic infections, a lot of them are silent infections, that they remain below the clinical horizon, is what that's called. Mm-hmm. And you can't recognize their presence. And maybe that's the inventor of this game actually has read some original microbiology literature and based this game on reality. Because I would agree with those characteristics, actually.
Yeah, I think they had some advisors that...
That's pretty good.
Because you'll see as we move in, there's some very good stuff here.
And this is a great way to learn this. Maybe I should get my medical students just to play this game.
I think it's a good idea.
Course.
You learned a lot playing this, didn't you?
Yeah, I learned a lot.
I think you did because you make more sense to me now, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Next screen.
All right, so the next screen, after you choose your class, the next screen would be name your disease.
Okay.
This is very fun.
You can name it whatever you want,
Yeah,
right?
anything you want.
Yeah, including Vincent, by the way. I see that
we
you've
named this
chosen
one
one.
We've named this disease Vincent.
Okay.
Right.
All right, so after you hit next, so then you get into the game. A screen will pop up saying tutorial. You should watch it, but if you already did, it'll still pop up. So just close that. All right, so your screen is a picture of the world, basically. And up in the top left corner, you get a mini map. There's a little red square which you could drag around to view different parts of the world. And yeah, and below that, there's breaking news, which advertises if, for example, Canada is going to exterminate insects if they transmit the virus, or if they have droughts in effect, or...
What does this say here now?
So right now, our disease has started in North Africa.
Uh-huh.
So North Africa is being...
So it always starts somewhere in the world, right?
Yeah, it's a completely random chance of starting anywhere in the world.
Okay.
So is Vincent a virus, a bacteria, or a parasite?
Right now, he's a virus, so he'll evolve fairly fast.
That's appropriate. And is he a vector-borne virus, or is he a just person-to-person virus?
Well, you can choose those characteristics.
You said insects. If they wipe out on the insects.
You have a menu. Which,
so is Vincent a vector-borne virus?
We'll get to that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead here.
Yeah, so... all right, so the disease spreads to North Africa, but just 1 second, we'll get right into that. Mm-hmm. All right, so disease can be spread through borders, like, say, a car or a train. They can be spread through planes, like through an airport, or shipyards through a boat. There are hospitals in almost every region which basically deploy the vaccine. And if they're closed off, the vaccine can't be deployed in that country. So there's also water plants, which infect the water, and then the government needs to hand out water. So, all right, and yeah, okay.
So if you click on North Africa,
if you click on an infected region or even a non-infected region, it'll bring up this region information. I don't know. Screen. Yeah.
What are the subheads there?
Right. So it tells you basically every information about the region. So it tells you if riots are in effect, floods, droughts,
Riots are in effect.
hurricanes, or earthquakes. I've never gotten a riot, so
You're lucky.
yeah. Well, if you're the virus, that's bad. But
It tells you the number of cases.
yeah. So
right?
also it also tells you the services that are active: airports, shipyards, hospitals, borders, transit, and schools. So they can close schools.
So as infections proceed, they close things down.
Yep.
Right?
But if your visibility is high, then they'll close them sooner than if it's low.
I see.
Got it.
So if they can't tell that people are infected, they won't react.
So they would close schools slower if it was a parasite than if it was a virus then.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it also depends on other things. And we'll get to that.
All right.
And also, it also displays governing government affairs, as if like handing out masks, water, and exterminating rodents, insects, curfews, and martial law, and if their dead bodies are being burned.
Or eaten.
Okay. And then about the population. It shows how many people are healthy, how many are infected, how many are dead, and how many are alive.
Great.
Right.
So,
And those numbers change as the
yeah, they
day
change
goes on.
quickly. All right?
Okay.
All right, closing that, going back to the main screen. On the bottom, there's menu, which basically brings up the menu. World, which shows the world information. So it shows like your live population, infected population, starting region, dead population, disease, start rate, start date, and a bunch of stuff like that. So it also shows you the vaccine status. It shows you how many hospitals are open, how many hospitals are active, and the approximate days to completion of the vaccine. Right now, at the start, they're not going to be making a vaccine, so you don't really need to worry about the approximate days to completion. And then it also shows you the clean regions, infected regions, and forsaken regions.
What does forsaken mean?
Everyone's dead.
It's very dramatic, isn't it?
Very dramatic.
All right. Another tab is the disease tab. And this brings up the tab to evolve and alter your disease.
This is very interesting.
All right, you're gonna like this. So, okay.
So I see the one that's up early on doesn't have many tabs on it, right?
Yeah. So in symptoms, there's 4 tiers. The first one is simple, like sneezing, coughing, fever, sweating, vomiting. But those are all very visible. So I like to sell those because you always start with one. So I like to sell them so it's no visibility. So we started with coughing.
Stealth. You like stealth organisms.
Yes, definitely.
Or they like that too. Do you know any stealth organisms?
I do not.
I mean, real ones. You've listened to our TWiVs. How about HIV?
That's stealthy.
Pretty
That's
stealthy. Pretty stealthy.
So you said you sell some of these characters?
Yeah.
You
so
can actually sell them?
It costs evolution points to sell symptoms, which can make it least visible. Well, I think you should get evolution points for selling them.
How do you get evolution points?
All right. You get evolution points by the matter of days that pass by.
I see.
And how many people you infect a day, the new regions you infect every day, how many people you kill a day. It all varies on that thing. So viruses get this faster because they have fastest evolution.
Right.
Bacteria is normal, etc. And
Parasites are slower,
slowest. Yeah. So
as you get points, you can get more tiers of... Here, what was the top one here? Symptoms. What's below it then?
All right, so after symptoms, there's 4 tiers. The higher the tier, the more lethal it is. So you can get to kidney failure, heart failure.
We'll see those, I think, in other screenshots.
Yeah,
what's this? This is called resistance.
All right,
right?
so you can also upgrade its resistance.
Upgrade the virus's resistance.
So you can upgrade its cold, heat, moisture, and drug resistance.
They got everything here.
They do.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, so depends on your starting region. It automatically gets 1 resistance depending on what your starting region is. So if you started in Russia, then it would be cold.
So here we have heat resistant.
Yeah, since we started in North Africa, we get heat.
Now, what's this one? Transmission. I like that one.
All right, it can be we can upgrade to all transmission. It can be rodent, insect, waterborne, and /or airborne.
So that's a bit unrealistic to be transmitted all these ways. I want you to know that, Aidan. That in real life, usually a virus is transmitted 1 or maybe a few ways at the most.
That's why our virus is special.
Respiratory. What's that?
That's why our virus is special.
Yeah, that's right.
But I see your point, Vincent.
Okay.
Okay.
The disease.
Okay, what's this last
And this
column?
last column is traits. This basically tells you the traits of what your class is. So if right now we have virus and it's durable.
I see.
All right. So
So now you're playing the game and cases are appearing, virus is moving. What do you do next?
all right. So one more thing about the disease tab. Your disease information. It's how many evolution points you have, average infections a day, and average deaths a day. It also has 3 bars, and however full those are, that's how full. The first bar is lethality, the second bar is infectivity, and the third bar is visibility. You want your visibility to be lowest, while your lethality to lethality and infectivity to be the highest.
Right.
Thank you, Vincent.
Perfect pathogens. You want high lethality, high infectivity, and low visibility.
Exactly.
And that makes perfect sense as far as we know, right, Dick?
Yep, people are dying, but they don't know why.
Right. If they knew why, then they would mobilize vaccines and so forth.
How about people that get infected that don't die right away and take the disease away with them to other places and give it to other people, and then they start to die? Wouldn't that be better? Then you would never know who did it.
Exactly.
Yeah, there is a travel component.
Yeah,
to
there
this,
is.
right?
But when I'm playing this game, what really confuses me, I don't have any symptoms at all. So you could be sick right now, Dick, and when you know, it'd be like a carrier, basically. So
A carrier, basically. I like that.
So there would be no symptoms, but still the governments would close down their borders, but they don't even know if people have the disease. So I think that's a little...
How did they find out?
I have no idea.
Maybe they're doing serology.
What did they do for SARS?
Kill all the civets.
No, they had a little temperature monitor device that they used to put up against your forehead
See
to
if you
take
had
your
a fever.
temperature.
So a fever is not very visible.
So that's how they guarded the border, by looking at fever.
Yeah, actually, a friend of mine went through Beijing airport, and he said there were all these temperature monitors.
Yeah.
He couldn't believe it. That as you walk through, you go through the metal detector, and then you go through a temperature detector. You have a fever, they don't let you travel.
Right.
Wow.
In fact, that might answer your question. How in this game they might know that you're infected and without symptoms. So fever is a low visibility symptom, right? In fact, on this chart, there is actually a list of all these symptoms which you can print out. Game guide. And they have a list of all the symptoms. I like this fever description. A fever occurs in a person when a threat is found within the body, resulting in a higher than normal temperature. Effects: fevers have the potential to be deadly while being barely noticeable. So it goes through all of these symptoms. I think this is pretty good, actually, for a game. Some of them are quite accurate. Necrosis, diarrhea, hemorrhaging sores, ataxia.
Good heavens.
It's pretty well done. Anyway, go ahead, Aidan.
Okay, so there's 3 different speed options in the game. There's slow, medium, and fast. And that basically, what that does is just makes planes, boats, time travel faster. And also, the time of real life, it starts in January 2008, and it goes up by hours rather than days or months. So the fastest time setting goes fairly fast. Slowest still does go.
What do you usually play?
I usually play the fastest.
What are you racing? You're racing against the development of the vaccine?
Before it's starting to be developed, you're racing against countries closing off everything.
Got it.
But once it's being developed, you're racing against...
So, what would they call that if a country closed themselves off? What would you call that activity? I'll tell you where it came from.
I think they're quarantining here. I hear sirens.
Quarantine.
I hear the sirens.
Quarantines. What did they quarantine for?
To prevent...
Where the heck did that start anyway?
To prevent infection from spreading to others.
No, we can tell you which disease caused the term quarantine to come into vogue. Can you guess? What color is that shirt?
Yellow fever.
Oh, yellow fever.
Exactly.
All right.
So, do you think that can stop a disease that's borne by mosquitoes?
No.
Because yellow fever is borne by mosquitoes, right?
Here's an even harder question. That's a good one, right? You can't, if you quarantine the people, the mosquitoes still fly. Is quarantine effective for a disease, a viral disease, where only 1 in 100 infected individuals show any symptoms of the disease?
Right.
I don't think so.
No, and that's what they tried with polio.
That's right.
In the U.S. They would quarantine all the paralyzed people. Meanwhile, there were 99 other infected people walking around still spreading the disease.
So what are some of the diseases that quarantine does work for?
So what would be a good one?
Well, I think it works for diseases like Ebola, for Lassa.
Measles, too, would work because it's all human-to-human transmission
and these are
with
rapid
high
development.
Apparent penetration, so most infections
and
result
smallpox.
in disease.
It works for smallpox, too.
Absolutely, yeah.
So any rapidly evolving disease is easy to quarantine for. Any slow development disease is very difficult to quarantine for. So your game takes advantage of that, too.
Yeah, definitely.
So you're the virus in this case. You're the enemy.
Yep.
We're the people.
Yep.
We're going to try to kill you.
Exactly.
What else you got there, Aidan? You've got some more screenshots to tell us about.
Where did I leave off? All right. Different symptoms cost different number of evolution points. And towards the end of the game, when everything's starting to be infected, it gets kind of annoying to get evolution points. They just come in ones, really.
And these are evolution points for the disease, right?
For the disease,
Well, what about the people? I want to ask you a few questions here, because I get a chance to ask these questions, right?
Okay.
When the Spaniards came to the New World, you know how many people lived here?
Not that many.
50 million people.
Really?
Yeah. You know why you don't think many lived here? Because there weren't many alive when the Spanish left. When the Spanish left, there were only 4 million people left. So what happened?
They brought disease over.
They did. They didn't shoot them. They didn't kill them with their swords. They killed them with common colds, smallpox, and several other diseases. In return, of course, we gave them syphilis. So you know what happened? They interbred with the native peoples here. You know what that did? It conferred immunity to the next wave of people that came over, and they didn't get any more outbreaks like that. It was that interesting. So the next time something like that happened, they're not in with 50 million people. Now there's almost 1 billion people living in this whole area.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So this mimics a lot of those characteristics.
As the game evolves, when does the vaccine come into play?
All right, so the vaccine comes into play when most regions in the world are infected, and they know it. So what will happen when you're playing, a screen will pop up saying vaccine, and it'll let you know that the world leaders are working on a vaccine.
We're only so easy, right?
Right.
A screen just pops up. It's great. So world leaders are working on a vaccine.
Exactly.
That would be a switch.
Yeah.
And then in this screenshot you have here, it says the recently deployed vaccine has worked as well as the humans had hoped. You are now unable to infect anyone new.
Yeah, that's basically tells you lost.
So how long does it take for a vaccine to be deployed?
It depends on how much drug resistance you have, and if you chose bacteria. So once,
let's say virus.
or if you have virus and you get full drug resistance before they started working on the vaccine, it'll take about 300 days to complete, probably.
So they actually talk about resistance to a vaccine in terms of drug resistance in the game? Because that's not correct. The drug is different from a vaccine.
I don't think the game actually has a difference between a vaccine and drug resistance. I think drug just means...
Because here's the issue with most vaccines, there are very few examples of viruses that become resistant to vaccines, right? Because it's an antibody or cellular response. It's an immune response. Actually, I know of one example, influenza virus, which evolves to escape the vaccine on a yearly basis.
That's right.
Right.
And also, the drug resistance and the bacteria bonus to drug resistance doesn't actually make it immune. But in one game where I actually infected everything, I was pretty proud about that.
Every person on Earth was infected.
Not every person, but every region. But that doesn't matter about every person. And what made me even more proud was that I had all 4 of the drug resistance, and I was a bacteria. So it took... And then I looked on the world menu, and it said at least 1,000 days to complete the vaccine.
Forget about it.
Yeah. And by then, you'd all be dead.
Right. Well, wait a minute.
That's what you have to do.
Yeah, I want to come back to the we'll all be dead thing, all right? Now, when I told you about the Spanish, when they came to this new world, there were 50 million people, and when they left, there were 4 million. Why do you think they all didn't die? When the plague first hit Europe in 1300, now that was actually in 1100, almost a third of Europe lived, meaning 2/3 died. Why did 1/3 live? They should have all died, right?
Well, I actually have
Right?
2 thoughts about that. Yeah.
Okay, give me both of them.
All right. So one of them, maybe some of them would just wouldn't interact with anybody who's infected, but
Right, so they were living in the country, they never got exposed. That was true for smallpox. That was very true for smallpox.
but also since it was transmitted by fleas, maybe I don't know. Maybe they could have still gotten infected. Another thing, maybe some people were immune to the plague, but I doubt.
Wait, I wouldn't doubt that one if I were you.
All right.
I wouldn't doubt that one if I were you.
Okay.
Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. No, really, because if bacteria can mutate, and if viruses can mutate, and if parasites can mutate, why can't we mutate?
We can mutate.
We not only do mutate, do we all look alike at this table?
No.
We're all mutants. We're sitting here with a bunch of mutants. We're an office full of mutants here.
Some of us are resistant to some infections, yeah.
That's
They
right.
survive and they propagate, and so the next round of infection is less serious.
Exactly. So, it's too bad you can't build that into your game, because if you could, then you could play a game. You can be the virus. I'll be the person. Let's see who can evolve faster.
Okay.
Let's see I can outthink a virus, but the virus can out-divide me. So you've got these thinking processes versus these dividing processes. Now you've got a game.
Yeah.
Now you could do this for money. In fact, it's called Merck.
Yeah.
We try to outsmart the influenza virus, but we're not doing too well.
And also, when I was playing this game, I saw some comments about people who've played it before.
Yes?
And they said that it was depressing to see a country close early on in the game, such as, for example, Madagascar. All they have is a shipyard to infect them by. And it's an island, so your viruses can't travel across the ocean, which I think is not too realistic at all.
Right.
And Madagascar's right by Africa, so it's not...
Not so. I wouldn't want to try to swim there if I were you.
Oh, yeah. Well, virus would.
Well, a bird could carry the virus.
bird?
Could a
Yeah.
mosquito go that distance, Dick? No, just not very far.
That's
Right?
really far from
I
that.
think the farthest you've said is 25 miles for a mosquito.
That's the New Jersey salt marsh mosquito. Can travel 25 miles.
Yes, but the Madagascar mosquito can't.
No, I wouldn't depend on that one if I were you.
Well,
All right.
It's why there are so many endemic species in Madagascar that you don't find anywhere else. Like lemurs, they're not found anywhere else but there, right? And the baobab tree, they're not found anywhere else
Yeah.
but there. You've seen that cartoon show, I hope,
No.
called Madagascar.
Yeah, of course.
The movie.
That's great.
Yeah, I've seen the movie.
In fact, there's a new one coming out now.
The New York Giants come to Madagascar. Yes. All right. Hey, Aidan, anything else about Pandemic 2?
Nothing else.
Now, there was
What do
a
you
game-
get when you win? Wait a minute. What do you get when you win?
I've actually never won. I was going to because I infected everything, but I accidentally hit back on the Google page.
Darn. Just at the last minute. But what if you didn't hit back on the last one? What would
didn't
you
hit
have
back.
won?
Since the vaccine would have thousands of days, like 1,000 days to complete, which is
Sure.
basically never,
Exactly.
I would have wiped out the human race.
Right.
And,
And then?
well, I don't know what happened, but comparing it to when I lost, it said you have wiped out everyone you can, but the vaccine's preventing you from wiping out everyone else.
Right.
So I would assume when you won that you've destroyed the human race. Congratulations. It would tell you your score, and you could either post the score and play again.
Okay, so you get your name at the top of a list then, and you're like the hero virus for the or bacteria for the world. How many people play this game, do you think?
No, that's a good question.
I've seen lots of comments.
It's an online. It's what's called a flash-based game. These
Right,
are easy
no.
games to play online. You don't need to download anything.
Right.
You just play them in your browser. So
Right.
I was looking at the comments. It looks like a lot of people play them.
Wow.
You play this game, you learn something. It's the
Yeah.
best kind of game because you absorb knowledge, and I've noticed Aidan learning things about infectious diseases
Wonderful.
from this game. So it's a really great game to play.
And plus, it comes at it from a unique perspective. How many of us teach from the perspective of the virus or the bacteria or the parasite? None of us. I can tell you right now, we all come from the human host.
Host, yeah, this game
We're
takes
gonna-
it the other way.
And it's
yeah.
exactly the opposite. And I think if you're not the parasite, you don't understand disease.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful perspective to start with. Because, I mean, A, you're never going to kill off everybody, right? Let's just face that.
Yeah.
But B, the biggest fear, of course, are from these very fast-spreading parasites, or viruses, I should say, which infect multiple age groups and which induce lots of symptoms that you can identify right away. And we're talking now about influenza, okay? That's the biggest fear on the planet right now. And to have a game that simulates the spread of an influenza epidemic based on transport of airplanes and ships and all those things, that's a wonderful deal. So that gets my A+ vote.
Very
Maybe
good.
I'll start playing video
You
games.
should try it, Dick.
Yeah.
You know, we might be in competition, so watch out, kid.
The thing about this game is that it's fun because it's an adversarial game, which kids like, maybe adults too, and you learn in the process.
Right.
Now, we have one more, very briefly, we'll talk about, and then we'll wrap it up.
Good.
Okay.
This
What's
game-
the third game?
This game that we're going to talk about next is called Bioshock.
Bioshock.
All right.
Okay. What's Bioshock?
And this game
This
is...
is a game you have to purchase, right?
Yeah, you actually got to purchase this game. I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's all right.
All right, so Bioshock is about plasmids.
Plasmids.
What's a plasmid? It's about plasmids? That's a rough start for a game, don't you think?
Plasmid. Do you know what a plasmid is?
A plasmid is a piece of DNA.
Yeah.
Good Lord, he knows. Well, how could he not know in your house?
Exactly.
But most kids wouldn't know that, would they?
Yeah, they probably would not know that.
It's a nice sounding word, though, isn't it?
Plasmid.
Yeah.
What do you
I'm
do?
not even
what
a
do you-
virus. I'm a plasmid.
What do you do with the plasmids in this game?
All right, I think this is kind of unrealistic, but plasmids alter your DNA. That's a weird look, dude.
Thanks very much for that. I'm waiting for the drop of truth here.
They alter your DNA. That's okay.
They do alter your DNA
All
by
right.
integrating into it, perhaps.
This is going to sound really silly. In this game, the plasmids alter your DNA so you can physically battle adversaries. So, for example,
Well,
there's...
they give you attributes.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
For example, there's an electric plasmid where you inject the plasmid, I guess. You can like zap. You can just fire.
Superhero. This has got a
Yeah.
superhero component to it.
Yeah, basically, and you can like burn people. There's one where you can shoot bugs from your arm.
Shoot bugs instead of like Spider-Man.
Yeah, like little like hives appear on your arm. Like you can actually see it when you're walking around, and you can like make people go, like shoot the wasps at people, and they like get annoyed, and you can blow them away with your shotgun.
So the concept is based on some reality that you can put DNA into organisms and
Right.
they'll take it up
Right.
and express it. But of course, this brings it to fantasy, which is fine. We need fantasy, right?
We do, of course.
So the storyline of this game, this boy, or man rather, he's in a plane and it crashes in the middle of the Atlantic in 1961. All right, so he's the only one who survives. All right, and he finds this tower in the middle of the water. So you got to swim to it, and you get in this elevator, which brings you down into the city underwater, which is called Rapture. You go into the city, and you can pick up this radio, and this guy, he gives you directions and advice of where to go and what to do. And he wants to take over the city, but you don't know that yet. He's tricking you. So you think his name is Atlas, but his real name is Frank Fontaine. And whoever hasn't played this game, sorry, I ruined it for you. He basically guides you along the city, and he explains how science is unstoppable in the city. Like the government won't bother you. You can develop anything.
Were that true today?
Ha.
Yeah, and I thought my dad would love this game.
That's great.
So
Maybe your dad is Frank Fontaine.
Excellent.
yeah, so it's controlled by a man called Andrew Ryan, and he runs something called Ryan Industries, which basically develops these plasmids. So there's also, in addition to plasmids, there's tonics, like physical tonics, and engineering tonics, and stuff like that, and they can help you. Like, for example, my favorite one is the camouflage tonic. If you stand still for like a few seconds, you just won't go invisible. just like a chameleon.
Right.
All right, so he basically leads you around, and your first plasmid is an electric plasmid. So you inject yourself, but since it's the first one, there's lots of side effects, like passes out basically. So when he wakes up, you guys know what splicers are, right? Gene splicers.
We are.
Yeah.
We are.
Why'd I ask that? All right, so the citizens of Rapture, they were using these plasmids normally. Like, unlike real life, when we want to heat our food, they would just light their hands on fire and heat it up real quick. So, like, they were used in everyday situations.
Sounds like a good idea.
This would be a heat plasmid. You'd put it
Yeah,
in.
fire, heat plasmid.
Useful in the woods, right?
Yeah.
You betcha.
So these were used every day.
Not so useful for shaking hands if you're a politician.
So,
Sorry, just trying to think of the downside here.
yeah. And as a good example. So,
Oh, thank you.
these plasmids altered their life completely for the better and for the worse. Like, they drove the city to madness. Your biggest threat while you're walking around the streets, or tunnels rather, because you're underwater, are the big daddies. And these are people who were not genetically altered, but physically altered to be bulkier and stronger than the rest of the people. They got these suits. They got drilled on their hand, and they basically protected these little sisters. Were protected by the big daddies as long as they got Adam. Now, Adam isn't spelled A-T-O-M. It's A-D-A-M. So, Adam is the genetic material that basically runs Rapture. In-game, you use Adam to buy different plasmids, different slots to put plasmids in. So it's like a currency. It's like a DNA genetic currency.
So what did Adam say to Eve upon seeing Eve? Madam, I'm Adam. Do you know what that is?
It's a riddle.
No.
Palindrome.
It's a genetic thing. You can read it the same way backwards as you can
forwards.
Madam, I'm Adam.
Cool. That's really cool. Did you just think of that?
No, that's an old one.
Really?
Yeah.
That's probably where the game creators are. Adam.
Perhaps.
So the goal in the Rapture now that it's fallen to madness and everyone's butchering each other is to get the most Adam, and whoever has the most Adam is the strongest. So unfortunately, the person with the most Adam was Ryan. So then Atlas tells you to go and kill Ryan. You kill him with a golf club, and then you take this chip, like computer chip that's on his person. You upload it into this supercomputer, and it basically transfers all the Adam to Atlas. And you think that's good, but then he betrays you, and you realize that he's Frank Fontaine.
Oh my God!
So he has all the Adam now, and that's bad. So the little sister's protected by the Big Daddy. You got to kill the Big Daddy in order to get the Adam.
It's interesting that so many games are based in science now, right?
But what I love about Bioshock is that you can make the environment work for you. Like, for example, the telekinesis plasmid allows you to pick things up, all right?
Without actually picking them up, right? You just think about it.
Float things by.
Got it.
All right, so in one of your weapons is a grenade launcher, and you can use proximity mines. So you can put them on, for say, a propane tank. You put 5 proximity mines on a propane tank, pick it up with the telekinesis plasmid, throw it at a Big Daddy, he blows up, you get all the Adam. You can make everything work for you.
Got it.
Excellent, just like the real world.
Yeah.
Now, another time we'll talk about a new game called Spore. Have you heard of that one, Dick?
I have, and in fact, a lot of scientists are upset about that game. Do you know why, Vince?
Why?
Because their names are being used in the game, and then they're not told about this, and the guy that's selling the game is using them to sell the game. So they're being used inadvertently, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
That's what I've heard.
The concept of the game is very interesting.
The concept of the game is very good, because it teaches about evolution.
Yeah. You pick an organism and you evolve.
That's right.
Game,
but when these guys were interviewed, they were never told their names would be used,
yeah,
and so it's
bad.
created a controversy.
You haven't played Spore, right?
I've not played Spore.
So maybe when you play it, you can come back and tell us.
Did you ever
about
play Myst?
Yes, we both love
We
Myst.
love Myst.
Myst is very good.
And there's no violence in Myst, right?
No, none whatsoever.
It's just your thought game. You're just trying to find out where that next door is.
It was a hugely popular game, even without violence.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you can have a good game without violence.
Well,
but it's hard.
Dick, it's very easy. It's very easy to make a violent game. To make a clever game that you think about is hard. And Myst was very
So ask me what my son does, Vince.
No one likes thinking games.
But Myst sold millions of copies, and it's a thinking game.
That's
How
true.
many copies on World of Warcraft sell?
All right.
So ask me what my son does for a living.
What does your son do for a living?
My son does voiceovers for video games. You've probably got a few video games that my son has got a voice on. He loves playing the villains.
And we need to get his voice for This Week in Virology.
Grand Auto Theft 3. He's got voices in that one.
Aiden doesn't play that. It's too violent.
Understood.
We don't let him.
Understood.
All right, we're going to wrap up our show today. I just have a few things. We have a science podcast of the week. We do this every week.
Good.
My pick. You can have picks too. Do you have any?
Not yet.
Okay, I have a pick. We can have 2 if you have one in the coming weeks. Mine is called Microbiology Bites, B-Y-T-E-S.
Aha.
It is a podcast by a virologist whom I know, A.J. Khan in the UK. And these are very short, 3 to 4 minute podcasts about viruses and bacteria and parasites, fungi.
Nice.
And every now and then he has some video thrown in as well. I like it. They're directed at students, but they're very straightforward.
Cool.
And they're quick, so it's not like our podcast that can go on for a long time.
Right.
Your interest. So that's our science podcast of the week. We'll put it up in the show notes.
Sounds good.
We are now listed at sciencepodcasters.org, which is run by Dr. Ginger Campbell, who has her own podcast, Brain Science Podcast, which we picked last time.
Very good.
And she's collecting science podcasts, so
Nice.
she's listed us now, which is great.
Terrific.
And we are also on the new and notable list at iTunes.
Oh, Vince.
So if you go to podcast listings under iTunes and then select Science and Medicine, there's a bar at the top that says New and Noteworthy, and we are there. And
I'll be darned.
the 15 or so new and noteworthy
Who would have
podcasts.
guessed?
So that's very nice.
It is nice.
Well, Aidan, thanks for coming today. Did you enjoy it?
No problem.
We
Yep, I had a
enjoyed
great
hearing.
It
We
was
enjoyed
terrific.
hearing about it.
Sure,
I
we
hope
really enjoyed it.
maybe we'll have you Skype in from home sometime in the future, right? It's easier than coming. You have a day off from school, so I know that's why you're here. Remember, if you have questions, if you want to tell us what to talk about, send us an email at twiv@twiv.tv. You've been listening to This Week in Virology. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.
See you next time is right.